All right. Donald Trump thought he was bulletproof. For decades, he walked into every room like the rules were written for other people. He survived bankruptcies, scandals, impeachments, indictments, verdicts, every single time he walked back out. But right now, overnight, something happened that even his closest allies are calling different. Not another legal skirmish, not another headline that fades by Friday, something that landed so hard, so fast, that the people inside his own circle are using a word they've never used before. Irreversible. So what actually happened between midnight and morning that has Washington frozen and legal teams burning through their phones? One development, one disclosure, one moment where the wall Trump spent 40 years building finally showed everyone exactly where the cracks were. And when you see what came out of that darkness, you'll understand why the people who've defended him through everything are suddenly very, very quiet. Because this isn't about politics. This isn't about which side you're on or which channel you trust. This is about a sequence of events that unfolded in a single night and changed every calculation on every side of this fight. And I'm going to show you exactly how it happened, step by step. Because when you see the full picture, when you see the timeline and what it actually means, the shock won't just make sense, it will feel inevitable. Let's go back. Not years, not even months, just weeks. The legal pressure surrounding Trump had been intensifying at a pace that even seasoned political observers described as relentless. Multiple fronts, multiple jurisdictions, multiple battles being fought simultaneously by a legal team stretched so thin that sources close to the situation described internal communications as somewhere between organized chaos and complete panic. Every day brought a new filing, a new deadline, a new demand. And every day Trump responded the way he always has. Louder, more aggressive, more combative. But something was different this time. The combativeness wasn't landing the same way. The rallies were still packed. Yes, the fundraising emails were still flooding inboxes. The social media posts were still reaching millions. But underneath all of it, in the quiet spaces between the noise, something was cracking. People who have known Trump for decades, people who built careers in his orbit, started saying things privately that they'd never said before. He looks exhausted. The energy isn't the same. The machine is still running, but nobody's sure who's actually driving anymore. That's a quote. Not from an enemy, from someone who voted for him twice and would probably vote for him again. And then came the announcement that shook everything loose. Here's what happened. And pay close attention, because the sequence matters more than people are reporting. It started with a financial disclosure, not voluntary, compelled, court-ordered documents that his legal team had been fighting to keep sealed for months finally broke the surface. And what was inside those documents wasn't just legally significant. It was the kind of material that rewrites the entire narrative his team had been constructing. Numbers that didn't match. Not by a little. By amounts so staggering that the first analyst to review them had to read the figures twice, then call colleagues and ask them to read the figures too, just to confirm they weren't looking at a typo. Property valuations that swung wildly depending on who was asking. Cash reserves that appeared substantial on one document and nearly non-existent on another. Business entities that existed on paper in ways that made forensic accountants stop and stare. One legal analyst who was briefed on the contents described it as looking at a magic show, except someone had finally turned the lights on in the middle of the performance. That was the first explosion. But it wasn't the last one that night. Because while those documents were being processed, while legal teams on both sides were burning midnight oil trying to understand the implications, something else was happening. Something that nobody had predicted and nobody was prepared for. A key figure inside the Trump orbit made a decision. The kind of decision that once made cannot be unmade. The kind of decision that changes every calculation, shifts every alliance, and forces every player on the board to reconsider their position from the ground up. The details of exactly who and exactly what are still being confirmed. But what sources are telling people who cover this closely is that the information that came out of that decision is the kind of material prosecutors dream about. Not circumstantial, not interpretive, direct, documented, the kind of thing that makes defense lawyers go very quiet in very long meetings, and Trump found out about it overnight. That's the part that matters. That's the part that explains what came next. Because the response was not measured. It was not calculated. It was not the product of careful strategy sessions with seasoned advisors. It was raw, it was immediate, and it revealed something that even his harshest critics hadn't fully anticipated. The posts started around midnight. One after another, not spaced out, not coordinated, just coming wave after wave in the kind of escalating emotional spiral that anyone who covers social media for a living can identify on site. This wasn't a communication strategy. This was a man who had just received devastating news and whose instinct, his oldest and most deeply ingrained instinct, was to attack. He attacked the judges. He attacked the prosecutors. He attacked media organizations by name. He made accusations that his own lawyers, according to sources close to the legal team, found genuinely alarming, not because of the substance of the accusations, but because of the timing. Because every single one of those posts was going to become evidence. Every single word was going to be read back in a courtroom by someone whose job is to make it sound as damaging as possible, and nobody could stop him. That's the detail that keeps coming up in every background conversation. Nobody could stop him. By morning, the legal community was awake and electric. Retired judges who rarely comment publicly were commenting publicly. Former prosecutors who had been cautiously reserved about the cases against Trump were suddenly not cautious at all. Constitutional scholars who tend to speak in careful, qualified language were speaking in something much closer to plain English. What they were all reacting to wasn't just the documents. It wasn't just the overnight posts. It was the combination. The way the two things, the legal exposure and the emotional response, had collided in the same 12-hour window to create a situation that every legal professional immediately recognized as extraordinarily dangerous for the person at the center of it. One former federal judge, someone who spent decades on the bench and has seen things that most people only read about in case law textbooks, put it in terms that cut straight through the legal jargon. When someone in legal jeopardy responds to new evidence by generating more evidence against themselves in real time, the phrase that comes to mind is not strategic. It's desperate. Desperate. That word kept coming up. From people who respect Trump. From people who don't. From people who genuinely don't know what to think of him. Desperate. Now here's where things get complicated. And they do get complicated. Because nothing in this story is as simple as either side wants it to be. Trump's defenders, the ones who have stood by him through every legal challenge, every verdict, every fine, every criminal indictment, they have a framework for all of this. And in that framework, what happened overnight wasn't a crack in the wall. It was another manufactured attack. Another coordinated assault by a system that decided years ago it was going to destroy this man regardless of facts, regardless of evidence, regardless of law. And you have to take that argument seriously, not because it's necessarily correct, but because millions of people believe it with the kind of conviction that doesn't bend under the weight of legal rulings or financial disclosures. These are people who watched institutions they trusted let them down again and again and again. And when someone comes along and says the system is rigged, the system is corrupt, the system is coming for me because I'm fighting for you, those people don't hear conspiracy theory. They hear confirmation. So when Trump posted those midnight messages, when he called it a coup, when he used language so extreme that cable news anchors had to pause and read it twice before reacting, his base didn't see a man losing control. They saw a man under siege, fighting back the only way he knows how. And that framing is powerful, more powerful than legal analysts tend to give it credit for. But here's the uncomfortable truth that lives right next to that reality. The legal exposure is real. The documents are real. The testimony, if it materializes the way sources are suggesting it will, is going to be real. And none of those things care about political framing. None of those things respond to rally energy or social media posts or fundraising surges. Courts move on their own timeline. Evidence speaks in its own language. And the situation that emerged overnight has put Trump in a position where the legal and the political are pulling in exactly opposite directions at exactly the wrong moment. Politically, attacking is the move. It always has been. Attack the process, attack the people, attack the institutions, turn the legal battle into a cultural battle, make every charge into a rallying cry. That strategy has worked. More than once, it has worked. Legally, attacking is potentially catastrophic right now. because the new material on the table isn't the kind of thing that gets weakened by public pressure campaigns. It gets stronger the more it's contradicted publicly. Every statement Trump makes that can be compared to what's in those documents is another comparison a prosecutor will eventually make in front of a jury. His legal team knows this. Some of them have reportedly said it directly to him, and some of them are apparently no longer his legal team, which tells you everything you need to know about how that conversation went. Let's talk about the broader implications. Because this isn't just about Trump. It never really is, no matter which side of the argument you're on. What happened overnight is a case study in something that America has never fully confronted before. What happens when the most legally exposed person in the country is simultaneously the most politically powerful figure in the country? What happens when the legal calendar and the political calendar are running at the same time on a collision course with no mechanism to separate them? Legal scholars have been writing about this theoretical problem for years. Now, it's not theoretical, it's happening. And the institutions that are supposed to manage it, the courts, the prosecutors, the political parties, the media, none of them were actually built for this scenario. They're all improvising in real time, with enormous stakes attached to every decision. That should make you uncomfortable regardless of your politics. Because the precedents being set right now, the decisions being made right now, they don't disappear when Trump is gone. They become the template. They become the playbook. They become the thing the next person points to and says, well, they did it this way, so we can too. The long-term consequences of getting this wrong in either direction are genuinely difficult to calculate. And people who spend their careers thinking about institutional stability are losing sleep over it. Not because of Trump specifically, but because of what Trump has revealed about the gaps in systems that everyone assumed were more durable than they've turned out to be. Here's what's going to happen in the next few weeks. Pay attention to this part. The legal machinery that was already in motion before last night is going to move faster now. New information has a way of accelerating timelines that seemed locked. Prosecutors who were building methodically are going to be asked to make decisions sooner than they planned. Defense attorneys who had crafted careful strategies are going to be forced to reconsider them in light of material they didn't anticipate. Trump's public posture will not change. If anything, it will intensify. The attacks will get more pointed, the language will get more extreme, the claims will get more dramatic, because that is the only gear this particular machine has when it's under maximum pressure. And it works for the purpose it's designed to serve, which is keeping the base engaged and the donations flowing and the political energy directed outward rather than inward. But behind that public posture, the internal reality is going to be increasingly difficult to manage. Sources are already describing a situation where different factions within Trump's circle are pulling in radically different directions. Some want a legal settlement at any cost. Some want to fight everything in every venue simultaneously. Some are quietly exploring what a political resolution might look like, if there even is such a thing. And some are simply preparing for outcomes they won't name publicly. The chaos is real. The uncertainty is real. And the thing about genuine uncertainty at this level is that it creates opportunities, both for people trying to resolve the situation and for people trying to exploit it. Watch Letitia James. That's the name that keeps coming up in the conversations that matter. Because whatever happens in the political arena, whatever narrative emerges in the media, whatever Trump says at his next rally, she has a legal mechanism that doesn't respond to any of those things. She has judgments, she has enforcement authority, she has a team that has been preparing for exactly this moment with a level of detail that most people would find startling. If the overnight developments add to her leverage, and sources suggest they do, the enforcement timeline could compress dramatically. The assets that everyone assumed were safely behind layers of corporate structure and legal complexity, those assumptions are being tested right now. And the results of those tests are going to determine whether Trump's financial empire survives this period or gets fundamentally restructured by people who don't work for him. Trump Tower keeps coming up in these conversations. It's almost symbolic at this point. The building that represents everything Trump wanted the world to believe about him. The building with his name in gold letters above the entrance. The building that his own financial statements described in ways that prosecutors have spent years documenting as fantasy. That building and what happens to it has become a proxy for the entire question at the center of all of this. Does consequence actually exist for people at this level? Or does power and celebrity and political support create a force field that legal reality simply cannot penetrate? Here's the thing that keeps me up at night, and I mean that genuinely. We are in a moment where the answer to that question is being written in real time. And the answer is going to matter to millions of people who will never set foot in a Manhattan courtroom, who will never read a financial disclosure document, who will never understand the specific provisions of New York Executive Law 6312. It's going to matter to the person who runs a small business and wonders if the rules that apply to them actually apply to everyone. It's going to matter to the person who watched their parents work their entire lives and follow every rule and still struggle, while watching others bend every rule and thrive. It's going to matter to the person who believes deeply and sincerely that the entire prosecution of Trump is political theater designed to destroy a movement they belong to. All three of those people are watching. All three of them have something real at stake. And the answer they get is going to shape how they think about institutions, about fairness, about whether any of this actually means anything for years beyond whatever happens in the next few months. That's the weight of this moment. And I'm not sure enough people in positions of power are feeling that weight appropriately. Trump, for his part, is not backing down. He has never backed down in a way that his opponents recognized as backing down. Even when he's settled lawsuits, he's framed it as strategic. Even when he's lost cases, he's framed it as temporary. Even when the evidence against him has been, by any objective legal standard, overwhelming, he has stood in front of cameras and crowds and said the words that his supporters need to hear, and the crowds have believed him. That's not going to change overnight. If anything, the shock of the overnight developments is going to fuel another surge in exactly that direction. More defiance, more attacks, more attacks, more claims that the walls closing in are proof of conspiracy rather than consequence. And some of those claims are going to land. Because some of the processes that have been used against Trump have been unusual. Some of the legal approaches have been aggressive in ways that genuinely concern even people who believe the underlying fraud was real. The line between legitimate prosecution and politically motivated persecution is not always as clear as either side pretends. And Trump's team knows exactly how to exploit every ambiguity in that line. So here's where we actually are. A man who has spent 40 years building an empire on the idea that his name is worth everything is watching that name become a liability in the financial markets, in the legal system, and in the institutions he spent decades cultivating relationships with. The banks that once competed for his business are maintaining careful distance. The insurance companies that once underwrote his risks are declining to underwrite his legal exposure. The advisors who once built their careers in his orbit are quietly updating their resumes. And at the same time, that same man is drawing record crowds, generating record donations, and maintaining a grip on a political movement that has proven remarkably resistant to everything the legal system has thrown at it. That's the contradiction at the heart of this moment. That's the thing that makes every simple narrative about what's happening wrong. The legal collapse and the political strength are not contradictions. They're feeding each other. Every legal blow becomes political fuel. Every legal vulnerability becomes a campaign message. Every attempt to hold him accountable becomes evidence in the minds of his supporters that the accountability is the real crime. There's no clean resolution to that dynamic. Not in the short term. Maybe not ever. But the overnight escalation changed something. It changed the temperature. It changed the pace. It changed the calculation for people who had been comfortable waiting this out, assuming that time was on their side. Time might not be on anyone's side right now. That's the feeling you get talking to people who have spent careers watching situations like this develop. The combination of legal pressure and political intensity and the kind of overnight volatility we just witnessed, that combination tends to produce outcomes that nobody planned for and nobody controlled. The next ruling, the next filing, the next document release, the next midnight post. Any one of those things could move the needle in a direction that makes everything that came before look like the quiet before the storm. Because here's what I've learned covering stories like this. They don't end cleanly. They don't reach a moment where everyone agrees about what happened and what it means. They escalate, they surprise, they produce developments that the most experienced observers look at and say they didn't see that coming. Nobody saw last night coming. Not really, not the way it actually unfolded. And that's the thing that should make everyone paying attention sit with a little more humility than the current discourse usually allows. The certainty on both sides of this, the absolute conviction that the outcome is obvious, that justice will prevail or that persecution will be exposed, that certainty is not warranted by the actual facts of the situation. The actual facts of the situation are that we are in genuinely uncharted territory. The legal system is being tested in ways it hasn't been tested before. The political system is under strains that its designers never anticipated. The media covering it, including everything you're watching right now, is navigating an information environment that rewards drama over accuracy and speed over understanding. None of that resolves cleanly. None of that has a guaranteed ending. What it has is consequences, real ones, for real people. Beyond the principals, beyond the lawyers and the prosecutors and the political advisors, beyond the people whose names you know. There are thousands of people whose lives are directly affected by what happens next. Workers, tenants, contractors, communities built around properties that are now operating under legal clouds they didn't choose and can't control. Their story doesn't get told enough, and it should. Here's what I know for certain. The shock announcement that dropped overnight didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of years of accumulated pressure, accumulated evidence, accumulated decisions made by people who believed they were untouchable, and accumulated warnings ignored by people who had every reason to pay attention. The next development is coming. The appeals court is moving. The prosecutors are processing new material. The financial enforcement mechanisms are loaded and ready. And Trump himself is doing what he always does under maximum pressure, generating maximum noise, maximum defiance, maximum energy directed outward in every direction simultaneously. Something is going to break. It might be the legal case, reduced on appeal, reframed, ultimately limited in ways that prosecutors didn't intend. It might be the financial empire, properties seized, assets liquidated, the golden letters above the entrance belonging to someone else's story. It might be the political narrative, the moment where even the most committed supporters look at the accumulated weight of everything and make a different calculation. Or it might be something nobody has predicted yet, something that emerges from the chaos of an overnight escalation that nobody planned and nobody controlled, something that lands with the kind of force that makes everyone who's been confidently narrating this story go quiet for a moment. I've been watching long enough to know that those moments come, usually when you least expect them. Usually in the space between what everyone assumed and what actually happened. The clock is running, the pressure is building, and whatever comes next is going to be bigger than anything that came before it. You need to be watching when it happens, because when it breaks, it's going to break fast. And the full picture, the real story underneath the noise and the politics and the legal filings and the midnight posts is going to be more consequential, more complicated, and more human than any simple narrative has been willing to admit. That's what keeps me here. That's what keeps me watching. And that's what should keep you watching too. Because here's what nobody is saying loudly enough right now. The situation didn't just escalate overnight in terms of legal exposure or financial pressure. It escalated in terms of human stakes, real, tangible, irreversible human stakes that extend far beyond the courtrooms and the rally stages and the cable news panels where people argue about process and precedent. Think about what's actually in motion right now. The appeals court is not just weighing a dollar figure. It's weighing whether the entire framework of accountability for powerful financial actors in this country means anything at all. That's not a legal abstraction. That's a question with an answer that ripples outward into every boardroom, every bank, every real estate deal, every financial statement signed by someone who assumed the signature would never truly be tested. And the answer is being written right now, in real time, by judges who are acutely aware that whatever they decide is going to be quoted, cited, referenced, and built upon for decades. They know they're not just ruling on Trump. They're ruling on the question of what America actually does when it catches someone at the very top of the financial pyramid operating with a set of rules they invented for themselves. That weight is visible if you know how to read the signals. The careful language coming out of the appellate filings, the way both legal teams are threading every argument with extraordinary precision, knowing that a single carelessly chosen word could become the pivot point in a ruling that reshapes the landscape. This isn't routine appellate work. Everyone involved knows it. Meanwhile, the political calendar keeps moving. Primaries, debates, endorsements, polling numbers, the entire machinery of American electoral politics grinding forward on its own timeline, completely indifferent to the legal machinery running parallel to it. And Trump is somehow expected to manage both simultaneously, to be the candidate and the defendant, the frontrunner and the man facing potential asset seizure, the figure projecting total confidence to packed arenas while his lawyers privately model scenarios that include losing everything. Nobody has ever done this before. Nobody has ever had to. And the strain of doing it is showing in ways that even supporters are beginning to notice, even if they won't say it on camera. The overnight escalation didn't just add pressure, it removed options. Paths that were open last week are narrowing. Calculations that made sense before the new document surfaced don't make the same sense anymore. And the people around Trump who understand the legal reality truly understand it, not the version designed for public consumption, but the actual version. Those people are having very different conversations in private than anything you're hearing publicly. Something shifted last night, permanently. And the next 30 days are going to reveal exactly what that shift cost and exactly who ends up paying for it. The story isn't over. It's not even close to over. But it is different now than it was yesterday morning. And different in situations like this one almost never means better. Watch carefully, because the next move changes everything. And that's where we leave it today. Not because the story is finished, but because this is the moment where everything that comes next depends on decisions being made right now behind closed doors, in rooms most of us will never see, by people carrying weight most of us will never fully understand. What happened overnight wasn't just news. It was a signal, the kind of signal that people who've been paying close attention recognize immediately, even if they can't yet name exactly what it means. Here's what I need you to do right now. If this story matters to you, if you believe that accountability, real accountability, is worth understanding and worth watching, then stay close. Because the next development isn't weeks away, it's days, maybe hours. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell, because when this breaks, and it will break, you don't want to be the last person to know. Share this with someone who needs to understand what's actually happening beneath the headlines and the noise. Because the truth of this story, the full, complicated, uncomfortable truth, is still unfolding. And I'm going to be here when it does. Don't look away. Not now. Not when it matters most. Because the people who look away right now are the ones who wake up tomorrow completely blindsided by what happened while they weren't watching. And in a story moving this fast with this many moving pieces, being blindsided isn't just inconvenient. It means missing the moment that explains everything that comes after. We've been on this journey together. Every development, every ruling, every midnight post, every document that surfaced when nobody expected it. And what I can tell you, after covering every inch of this story, is that the people who stayed informed, who kept watching, who refused to let the noise drown out the signal, those people understood things that casual observers completely missed. That's what this channel is built for. Not the headlines, not the hot takes, the actual story underneath all of it. The real sequence of events, the genuine consequences, the human reality behind the legal language and the political theater. So if you found value here today, if something clicked that didn't click before, leave a comment below. Tell me what you're watching. Tell me what questions you still have, because your questions drive where this coverage goes next. The story continues. And so do we. Together. See you in the next one.